What's up, guys? We're back at our mid-century modern project here in Lincoln, an extensive kitchen remodel that has trickled into other parts of the first floor, including a full bathroom renovation. However, this week we are focused on getting the subfloor dead flat in preparation for our tile floor. Why don't we go inside and touch base with Mike? So this place looks great. The floor looks brand new. But one question before we get into what we're standing on now, the kitchen area. We have new plywood. Why is that different than what we're standing on?
So that's the old original part of the house, full foundation under it, lifted everything up, set our height over there, flattened everything, leveled everything, and spent a ton of time making that perfect.
So that's our benchmark for our subfloor height.
Yep.
And that height was based off the wine cellar?
Correct.
So what are we standing on here?
So at some point they added on to the house and they didn't do a full foundation. They just did a poured slab on grade.
And oddly enough, they threw it on this little like 45-degree angle, which makes everything a lot more interesting, especially our tile layout, which will end up in this space. Speaking of tile, I know before we even got to this, we had a bear of a time demoing some terracotta tile. Yep,
old terracotta tile, and it was really stuck down to this concrete floor.
And there was a couple of guys going at it with chipping guns for a few days, and what we ended up with was a pretty torn up slab. High spots, low spots.
Wanted to just flatten everything out and kind of see what we were working with.
So that brought us back down to essentially what was the original concrete elevation. Why did we end up going the self-leveler route?
Well, part of it was even just from like where we're tying in over with our new subfloor, from one side to the other, we had like 3/4 of an inch difference.
You're talking about where the concrete slab and the plywood met.
Yeah, on this like 45 out here, we had to address that. And then as we set up a laser and we came out in and around this whole area just to kind of see what we're dealing with, and we had some issues. Some of the corners of the concrete slab was falling off by 3/4 of an inch.
And that's a big deal because in this space, kitchen running into this dining area and this sunken living room, we're actually gonna be installing a large format tile. I believe they're about 31 by 31.
Yeah.
They're big.
They are.
And they're on a funky angle. We have a funky angle dealing with the house. It was really important that we got that flat surface.
Yeah.
So let's dig into the process because you and I have done self-leveler, and I feel like we've done it a lot of times wrong. And
I definitely have.
And oftentimes we end up with a result that is probably worse than what we started with. Yeah. Thinking, even some of our subcontractors, they'll avoid that and think that, because it's so difficult. You reached out to a local rep, right?
We reached out to Mark Conley. He's the rep for CTS Cement Rapid Set.
So Rapid Set's the product we used here.
Yeah.
Their whole system.
Yep, and Mark loves concrete.
Wealth of knowledge, right?
He's a walking concrete encyclopedia. He knows everything about this stuff.
So Mark showed up on site and basically, more than just gave us some information. He got in there dirty, yeah, and he
brought all his tools, everything.
I think that's awesome. So walk us through the process. So what we're standing on here it's a hydraulic cement product.
Yep.
Made by Rapid Set. It's level floor.
Level floor.
But this can't go directly on concrete, right?
No, you got to use a primer. And so Mark suggested using their acrylic primer.
Mm-hmm. How many coats does that go on?
So we did 2 coats here.
Yep.
Probably could have used that 3rd coat.
Is that what I'm looking at here with these bubbles?
Yep, the bubbles is just a little bit of gas escaping through that old slab.
So it's my understanding that the primer is more than just for adhesion. The primer is adhesion, but it's also
stopping. It seals it.
It seals it.
Yeah.
And what this is, it's gas.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
Escaping from the concrete.
Yep.
So what determines that second coat? I think you had mentioned before.
Dry time. So like when you're installing your primer, you have to use a soft bristle brush. So then you're working it into the capillaries of the concrete, sealing that up.
Versus a roller, which you would think you could use.
Yeah, but the roller is like, you're just gonna be buzzing over the top. You're not really gonna be working it in. And so then you go over everything. The first coat, at least with here, like sucked up. It was drying up almost instantly.
So I think on the bottle it says 2 coats for normal concrete. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't know who defines what normal concrete is, but obviously we have abnormal concrete.
Yep. And so, but they mentioned that like on your final coat, it's supposed to, stay wet for about 20 minutes.
So you guys were kind of tracking that time.
Yeah, we thought we had it, pretty good, but I guess, obviously because we got the bubbles.
Are these an issue?
No, Mark was not concerned about that at all.
Okay.
He said if you saw it like, everywhere.
Widespread.
Yeah, it would have stopped immediately,
Sure.
just kind of clean up the mess we would have made and, you know, throw another coat of primer on it and then get back to it.
So this stuff you have to apply the topping slab. I keep calling it a topping slab, but the self leveler, the level floor, within a certain amount of time of the primer, correct?
Yeah, you install the primer, you wait for that to dry, and then you have, you know, 24 hours from then to install your self leveler over that.
You guys are mixing big batches because Mark brought, what'd they call it?
It's a Hippo Mixer.
A Hippo Mixer.
Yeah.
And this thing essentially saved our life here.
It
right?
really did. We ended up doing about 60 bags, 60, 50-pound bags of self leveler.
How many bags are you mixing at once?
We're doing 5-bag mixes.
5-bag mixes at once. You're mixing it. You're probably timing it. At that point, how are you spreading it across the floor?
So this mixer, it had wheels on the bottom, and then it was just like a small lever on the side, and you could just pour it out.
So you're dancing with this thing across the floor.
You start in one corner, and then you work right across the room, pouring it out, you know, getting, you know, a nice even spread on the first one. As you do that first batch, then that mixer goes right back. We had a little mixing station set up behind us. Put the water in, get that mix in, then you start dumping the bags back in. And
so at that time, is what you just placed setting up?
It's starting to. That's when you start working it with a trowel to kind of work it into the corners and make sure it's nice and smooth.
Basically, one guy working that material to keep it from hardening too soon while you guys make another mix.
And, you know, it is a self-leveler, but you do have to work it into, you know, get it flat. If you dump it in one corner of a room, you know, if we took all the bags and just dumped it in there, it doesn't work like that.
Right.
There is some work that goes into it.
So you're at that point, so you make another mix, you're doing a small overlap and then continuing to trowel.
Yeah, when you start pouring your next mix, he was saying you want to be pouring into the old one, like your first, I guess, batch by like 3 to 4 inches. So you're always keeping a wet edge, and then that'll prevent any cold joints in the floor.
So you get that whole, let's talk about the sunken living room behind us. Yeah. You get this whole area, you know, poured. Everything's poured. There's probably a guy down here troweling.
Yep.
Is that the final step?
Nope. Once we got about 3 mixes down and you have like a good area, another guy will put on a pair of spike cleats that go right on the bottom of your boots. And we took a porcupine roller.
So the porcupine roller is essentially a wire brush in a circular shape that you're rolling across the top of it.
Yeah.
Now, what is that porcupine roller doing?
It's breaking any surface tension in that self-leveler. When we're troweling out the floor, Mark was saying, you know, you go north-south.
Okay.
So you're working one way, kind of pulling it towards us, and we're working our way towards the mix station.
So for reference, you're pouring the material east-west.
Yep.
And troweling it north-south.
Yep.
Okay.
And then we came back with the porcupine roller going east and west.
Okay.
So then you're, you know, I guess going the opposite direction of your trowel marks to help break any surface tension and really lay that floor out nice and smooth.
So when you say surface tension, I noticed one, you know, at the end of the day, I saw some pictures of it and it looked dry.
Yep.
What, you know, you would call it, it's almost like a film or
skim coat over the top.
A skim coat on the very top of it. What is, I thought it was just the reaction to, you know, not the chemicals, but what it's made up of and how it was drying in like the air, but it actually has a purpose.
Yep. And that, it prevents the self-leveler from drying out too fast.
So it's trapping moisture.
Skim the top, and then it traps the moisture in there to allow it to fully cure.
As we know, like with concrete products and cement products, you know, they moisture cure, and that essentially, you know, dictates on how hard this stuff cures. And this stuff can be, I believe it's 1/8 of an inch up to 2 inches. So that skim coat on the top is really crucial to make sure that this stuff is hardening to a level that is suitable for what we're going to put on top of this.
Yep.
And I think you had made a reference about you know, it was really important to keep the windows closed, right?
Yeah, before we started, Mark, he made us go around. We shut all the doors, windows, and because as it's drying, if you have any like wind or anything coming through the house, he was even saying like mechanical systems. If you have, you know, pulling a bunch of intake air or something like that, you'll see some veining in the self-leveler, and it's just pulling the moisture out too fast.
So you have all the windows shut, this thing skims over. How long until you can walk on it?
It's 2 to 4 hours.
For you to have foot traffic.
Foot traffic.
We're golden. You guys, this was kind of end of day, let it dry overnight, you're back here. I think industry standard, and you guys certainly will correct me if I'm wrong, but for tile, we're looking for 1/8 inch within 10 foot. So we're taking a straight edge and kind of checking it. And
I took a string line and we were going like from our far corner to the far corner, and we were within 1/8 inch everywhere.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a much better success rate than we've had in the past.
Yes.
So as you can see, we have a little bit more work to do on the roof. Mechanicals are signed off, but we're gonna get this place plastered, and then we're gonna dive back into the floor, and we're gonna be installing an uncoupling membrane across the self-leveler onto the plywood. So we have kind of basically bring it to unison before we install these really cool 31 by 31 tiles. As always, we appreciate you following along. Check us out on Instagram, and make sure you hit that subscribe button.